Ow! Greetings, YouTube. This is Dad Crash, better known as Brandon, BookTube's best kept secret. It's always a pleasure to make the acquaintance of a fellow author, especially one who has written a work of literature, or works in this case, that you end up growing to enjoy and appreciate and just plain blows you away with its creativity and imagination. And I'm proud to say that I've made such an acquaintance and developed an ongoing rapport with two such authors thus far, and they have both been a benefit to me as a writer and a sci-fi fantasy aficionado, and not to mention their works being a source of quality entertainment. And it is the works of one of these authors that I will be featuring in today's review. But first, just a quick bit of shameless self-promotion. I would like to first preface this by letting you all know that I realized that I left out some small but nonetheless important info from my last video. And this is the fact that you can find many more of my book reviews in written form on InReview, a web source for movie, TV, and of course book reviews for works of literature both old and new, including works of sci-fi and fantasy that I've had the pleasure of reviewing over the past year and a half. And now, for today's highlight from my personal bibliography. There is a war that few at all know, a conflict that has been raging unseen for the better part of 10,000 years. It began with an ancient civilization's fear of death driving their endeavors to create the elixir of life. Its result? Eternal life was given, but at a terrible price, as this mythical people's most brilliant alchemists, Talante and Lothos, became the first vampires, nearly impossible to kill except by the rays of the sun, and possessed of an unending thirst for human blood. One sought to undo this curse. The other was corrupted by his newfound power and sought to dominate, changing the two former colleagues into bitter enemies and building their progeny into two clans that, over time, honed their respective preternatural talents toward divergent ends. A clan of shapeshifters, bent on changing humanity into their personal cattle, and a clan of mind readers living in mutualistic symbiosis with human allies devoted to thwarting the agenda of their shapeshifter enemies. The War of Millennium Night was conceived during a time that I fell in love with and romanticized vampire romances, inspired by Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles, Octavia Butler's Fledgling, and some of the more attractive elements of the mythos of Stephenie Meyer's Twilight series, make of that what you will. The War of Millennium Night took shape within my head soon after. Currently consisting of my two finished books, From Slate to Crimson and Double Cross My Heart, with others slated to come down the pipe in due time, I created this series to appeal to vampire lovers who like their stories with humanity, pathos, sensuality, and a penchant for the unsettling. Information for my in-review book reviews and my War of Millennium Night series, available both in paperback and ebook, can be found down in the doobly-doo. As for my books, all I ask is that if you feel so inclined to pick up a copy of my work, do leave at least a short review, even if you didn't like it. And now, on to our featured review. Science fiction is a genre that is lousy with tales of future advancements and technology. There is no end to creativity when it comes to speculating the direction that civilization will take long after we're gone. Now, while some of these literary jaunts take the reader decades or centuries into the future, or take the journey through time even further with civilizations removed from ours by orders of millennia, a few, like Gene Wolfe's Book of the New Sun or Jack Vance's The Dying Earth, push forward into future worlds millions or even billions of years from now, where technology of countless empires having risen and fallen blur the lines between sci-fi and fantasy in a nigh unrecognizable world. And while it doesn't venture quite into a future so distant, Haldane B. Doyle's distant future epic, Our Vitreous Womb, does nevertheless create a world far enough removed from what we know as for it to be something to which we would be quite estranged. In an Earth some 30,000 years in our future, on what we know as Australia, technology has evolved from steel and circuit to almost solely biological thanks to the skill of the Australs, a highly advanced subspecies of humanity who now inhabit the continent. They are a fascinating civilization, living in small, compact communities that serve highly specialized functions, with each community biologically unique from one another and geared towards their specific operations, like, well, I'm getting somewhat ahead of myself. Besides, there is much, much more to this series. And it all begins with the story of Mayabeth Anabasi in the series premiere, Her Unbound Hallex. Mayabeth is a member of the Alate class of humans, who are given lives of luxury and seemingly trivial tasks in service to their unseen archbishop, before birthing the next generation and passing the estate to them before leaving to join the distant, unending war against the mysterious slave empire. But Mayabeth, headstrong and endlessly questioning to the consternation and eventual fury of her taciturn mother, is dissatisfied with this life, chafing in her gilded cage, until a chance meeting with Arbin, a member of the Crefters, a lower working caste, arouses her curiosity, fascination, and soon desire. With his help, Mayabeth escapes her current life of banal predictability, and together they journey to the abode of the Archbishop, during which she comes to understand the true nature of her world. But even her freedom from her mother's humiliating and painful attempts at forcing her to conform to the Alate's small-minded ways, and in the arms of the man she loves, she comes to realize that she has merely exchanged one gilded cage for another, and must deal with what that entails. Though at first not directly connected to the prior series of events, the tale in book number 2, Her Lethal Secretions, soon intersects with the result of Mayabeth's actions in the first book. But whereas the previous book focused mainly on the human element of this changed world, the story radically switches perspective, both in character and species, as we now focus on the life of the voluptuous and perpetually dissatisfied Austral, Lanella, at war between her aggressive and nurturing sides in a community of caregivers to the next generation bred with a special purpose. This inner conflict leads her to commit an unforgivable act that ostracizes her from her community, until the opportunity of a lifetime presents itself to her, a chance at redemption by founding her own community, a privilege granted to only a select few. And so, to prove her worthiness for this honor, she is sent to the estate of Mayabeth's now quite unstable mother, to serve as wet nurse to her infant daughter. Once there, Lanella finds herself in a less than optimal situation, weathering the culture shock of exchanging her predictable life for the chaos of living with humans. While enduring this temporary situation, she finds a friend in Oji, Mayabeth's forlorn son of mixed Alate and Crefter heritage, apparently abandoned by her mother. All the while, Lanella finds more demands being made of her, postponing what was promised, and pushing the realization of her dreams ever farther away. In the final 2 volumes of this series' current composition, Oji takes a more prominent role, now an adult living in a seaside Crefter village, before he is introduced to Suvita, the central character of Book 3, her pellucid pupil. An unfortunate Austral from a subterranean community of record keepers, unfortunate that is due to a genetic defect that renders her unable to reproduce. She is dissuaded from committing the usual voluntary suicide as is customary for Australs when they can be of no further use to their community. Rather, she is minded to leave her home and serve as a historian in the Crefter village, where she meets and befriends Oji, who works with her as she compiles uncovered ancient documents. Forced by circumstance, she becomes his wife and confidant, finding a kindred spirit in the nervous human, sharing his loneliness despite their relationship being mostly asexual and ultimately doomed to tragedy, compiled by Oji's cowardly nature. This leads to the events in the 4th and currently final book, His Indelible Fingerprint, where Oji is forced into the company of Remus, an ambitious Austral envoy who travels between communities. Though embittered by the betrayal of another of his kind whom he loved, he finds renewed purpose in his life after saving Oji from certain death. Witnessing an amazing genetic trait the young man possesses, which will be invaluable in bringing ultimate victory against their slave empire enemies, he takes Oji along with him as the two set off on a journey to found their own community, despite how most of Remus's people view humanity, least of all the generally unattractive and cowardly Oji, as a lesser life form. Whew! Believe it or not, folks, that was the most concise description of the series I could muster without spoiling the panties off of this one. And believe me, there are a lot of panties to spoil. I regret nothing. But seriously, there is so much to say about this series that I jumped into on a mere whim. Doyle just all around impressed me with the world he created, and especially how he brings it to life. In a nutshell, it can be condensed into one word: context. I know it doesn't sound all that deep at first blush, especially for those who know anything about the writing craft. After all, context is naturally a key component of world building for any story, but Doyle accomplishes the world building of these respective tales purely by context. The perspective of each book's focal characters are limited by the part of this futuristic world they are born into, causing the world to expand and build up from their perspective experience, which is then added to the story's complex tapestry in each successive book. Best of all is how it all starts, taking baby steps in Mayabeth's story, a perspective of a human who comes to understand how little she truly knew about her world. Her estate feels like something that we might be familiar with, except for how insular it all feels. For the beginning of the book, there's no biotech that was spoken of in the plot blurb until Mayabeth's ultimate escape from her estate and into the greater world. And this gives the reader that first glimpse into something that is truly different and alien to the world we know. It is then that we meet the Australs and their admittedly puzzling ways, which remain mostly a puzzle until the second book, which switches perspectives to the Australs themselves. The reader is expected to slowly step into their alien perspective with baby steps in the first book until you understand this world better and are prepared for the rest of the story. In my opinion, this came about as nearly genius and kept me riveted through the remaining 3 books. And this is what I mean, in part, by Doyle's use of context. Rarely is this world revealed in a purely expository manner, making the development of this radically changed Earth as organic to the reader as the Australs' technology. And speaking of organic technology, the Australs quickly became a race that never fails to fascinate. In a manner similar to the alien Oankali from Octavia Butler's acclaimed Xenogenesis trilogy, which I have spoken about in prior reviews on my channel, Australs have engineered living creatures that serve all manner of functions, from cleaning to analyzing, healing, and other machine-like tasks. Moreover, it is made to appear so much more elegant and refined than any human technology, which, even that of the slave empires, appears crude by comparison, or even primitive or barbaric at times. In fact, as a species, Australs are ever more strongly depicted as a next step in human evolution, for lack of a better word. Each of their communities is dedicated to a singular, highly specialized task which services the whole, and the Australs in their specific communities possess biological traits that make them perfectly suited for their respective jobs. And each of these communities work together as a whole, innovating as needed by individuals forming new communities with new functions that benefit the whole, all to promote their survival against their slave empire enemies. In short, and as a whole, their society exists individually as something akin to specialized organs of a superorganism spread across the continent. So devoted are the Australs in their unified endeavor, in fact, that Doyle describes them as holding absolutely no fear of death. Every Austral carries a single orb on their person at all times, and even grant one to humans who have been accepted as part of the community. This orb they swallow in order to voluntarily end their lives in the event that they feel that they have accomplished all that they feel they needed to do in life, and therefore, at least in what I can gather, spare their communities the need to care for the elderly or infirm. But I think I've gone on long enough with the finer points of the series. Gotta leave some surprises, after all, right? And so, I believe it's time to move on to cons. Upon reflection, I believe that there are 2 things that come to mind, though to some they may not exactly be considered actual drawbacks. The first is, ironically, what I spent much of these last few minutes gushing about. You see, the contextual buildup of Doyle's distant future world for some might be as off-putting as it was refreshing for me, as so much of it is presented as commonplace as furniture without so much as an explanation, something that readers who prefer a more narrative-grounded methodology for their world building might take issue with. The second issue, like the first, is something of a matter of taste, and at the same time something I found as attractive as it was irksome, but not in a way that detracted from my enjoyment. And this is the fact that anyone who reads past book 1 will quickly discover that Doyle is not a fan of happy endings. Rather, each of the first 4 books leads to denouements that are at best bittersweet. However, each ending, especially those that present OG as a central character, feeds into each other and will, according to my occasional conversations with Doyle, serve a greater purpose as new books are released, something that I personally can't wait for. So whether you will see these cons that I've listed as actual drawbacks will definitely be a matter of your personal preferences. Our Vitreous Womb is a somber yet fascinating series of tales, featuring a people who are both alien and yet still deeply relatable. The Australs and their integrated, distant future society, and how much the uniqueness of an otherwise insignificant member of a seemingly primitive race changes the game for their people's endeavors, captivated me in a very surprising way, and if what Doyle has said to me in our chats makes it to paper in his succeeding volumes, the best is yet to come. So, if you're a discerning sci-fi nerd who is looking for something different in the vein of great works for distant speculative fiction, then Doyle's work ought to scratch that itch. Links for the purchase will be in the doobly-doo, and happy reading. And so, we've once again reached the end of yet another book review. I hope that this has made you curious about this particular work, or at least piqued your interest in my prior reviews, or at least my featured book. It's my hope that you'll check them all out. As said before, links to all that will be in the doobly-doo as well. And be sure to comment, rate, and subscribe so that I can be a secret no more. Thanks for listening, everyone. And so, until next time, this is Dead Crash, better known as Brandon, saying stay lucky and stay blessed. Take care.